Hello and welcome to another episode of It Came From the Page. So, this last month was Old School April, and honest to God, probably the best time I've had on BookTube so far. It was like a month-long event where it's like reading, watching, and I just had a really, really good time with it. So I thought, hey, some months I do a like monthly wrap up, some months I don't. There doesn't really seem to be like a a formula as to whether or not I will do one or not. It's just whether or not I feel like it. And since I had a great time in this event, I feel like why not? And because this wasn't just a readathon, this was also a watchathon. I'm also going to quickly go through and rank all of the movies from worst to best that I watched. I got quite a bit in for Old School April, not as much as I was hoping, and that was mainly because like I had like not a great health month. You saw in some of those vlogs where it started all the snow was gone. The next week it was like super snowy, and like that was just causing so much nerve pains. My right side was just like in pain for like a large portion of that month. So I'm really glad I got as much as I got done because I was very uncomfortable for most of that month as far as like physically went. I'm really glad that Old School April was there. So it's like, oh, I'm feeling terrible, but hey, I'll go on sprints and like hang out and chat with my friends and the other people who are watching, I guess. And those I think got me through a little bit. So it was a needed reading event, and I didn't even know it was something I needed. So starting off, the worst. I'm going to start off with the movies. There's less movies. I haven't been watching as many movies recently. I used to be watching I used to probably get up to like 300, 400 movies a year. It's because movies used to be my main thing that I would watch all the time. Like I'd usually watch maybe like 2 movies a night or something, and then like go to bed or whatever. Since having the stroke, reading has been like a lot more impactful and important and interesting to me as a pastime. So movies have gotten less and less and less, to the point that by now, at this point in the year, I've only watched about 35 movies, which, for some people, that's a normal amount of movies. But for me, it's like an abnormally low amount of movies. But because of that, I have been a little bit more picky and choosy with what I watched, and therefore, I've watched some pretty good movies. But let's start with the things that weren't that great. This was, this is one of the live streams, and this was Barracuda from 1978. Now, this movie, bad. This is an awful movie, but it has an amazing ending. Like, the ending comes out of nowhere and is amazing. It's very bad, very stupid, but the ending is hilarious. So if you could track down Barracuda, just watch the last, 30 minutes. There's like barely any Barracudas in there, but it was very fun to watch with a whole bunch of other people on a live stream, because when that crazy event happens, where the twist, so to speak, happens, it kind of comes out of nowhere, it is amazing and hilarious. I also do have Old School April mug. I really think that all reading events should have mugs. But anyways, Barracuda was very bad, but was very fun to watch with other people. Next up, the rest of the movies I watched, though, pretty good. The next up, this is a TV movie from 1973, is the New Orleans Tapes. Oh, no. Sorry about that. The kitten wants to play with Nami, and Nami does not want to play with the kitten. So she was hissing at the kitten to say, hey, give her some space. Anyways, this is the kitten. I named it Bert after the Blue Barracudas. That was the team I was on for Old School April. Anyways, New Orleans Tapes was quite fun. This is a Dan Curtis TV movie. If you don't know who Dan Curtis is, he was the one who started Dark Shadows back in the day, which was a very, very famous gothic, pretty much like soap opera. It was like an early gothic soap opera that ran daily for years, and as such there's like hundreds of episodes. But Dan Curtis has done a lot of other things, and one of these was the New Orleans Tapes. It's basically like a newspaper reporter man kind of gets, it seemed like it was probably kind of be like a Kojak esque thing, and again, that's probably a reference that people don't get either. But it's basically like it's basically like a newspaper. It's basically like an investigative reporter going to investigate supernatural occurrences. And yeah, it was very fun, very atmospheric. But so what's nice about the Norris tapes and what's nice about Dan Curtis movies from the 70s, they're not super gory or anything, but they are super atmospheric and actually end up being quite scary because of that. So if you're a fan of, 70s TV movies, the Norris tapes is quite good. Next up, this is like an early slasher. I don't remember anything about this movie. I was, let's just say, reasonably sauced when I watched this one. And this is The Boogeyman, which is by Uli Lamel from 1980. It was a trippy, weird movie, and there's a lot of some very funny and amazing death scenes that happen where you're like, whoa, what just happened there? And it was very odd and strange and dreamlike, and as such, I had a great time with it. I'll have to watch it again because I don't have too much of a recollection of that one. Next up is Carnosaur 2. I do not like the original Carnosaur, neither really the book nor the movie. The book is better than the movie. The movie is just real bad. But I actually quite liked Carnosaur 2, and that's probably because Carnosaur 2 is basically just a straight up ripoff of Aliens, and we all know I love me my Xenoboys. There are some really bad looking cheap raptor suits in this that I loved, and I was like, this is amazing, this is so good. And it's like just people like fighting with like plastic suits that don't have the articulation, and it's just very fun, very wild. I actually watched this one on VHS, and if you can, that should be how you watch it. Next up, another movie that is of the monster variety, and that is Q, the Winged Serpent, by the legendary Larry Cohen. This movie is wild. It is a movie that has, like, basically in New York, there is just a giant dragon hanging out and just, like, taking people off of, like, rooftop swimming pools and stuff like that, or people just like hanging out on roofs feeding pigeons. Like, it's just like going around the city just taking people, and they're like, oh, what are we gonna do about this New York dragon that we basically have? And you eventually discover that it's actually Q stands for Quetzalcoatl, which is a creature from folklore. It doesn't, like, the beast does not look like that legend. This movie is like half the police and detectives and everyone trying to, like, stop the monster, and the other half is like a con man who knows where the monster is, played by Michael Moriarty, just trying to hold the city for ransom in order to tell them where this creature is hiding. And then there's like ritual murders happening at the same time. It's wild. There's so much in there, and it's definitely not boring, and it is very, very funny, and actually has some pretty good monster scenes. Next up, this is a movie I had seen before, but it had been years, and this is Brain Dead. Amy from Amy Noel Reads was live streaming this on the Discord for a watch party, so I kind of joined in, and I was like, oh, I haven't seen Brain Dead in a while. It was so much fun. This movie is extremely gory and extremely wild, and in a few places was pretty offensive. But it is just one of those things that's throwing everything at the wall. The effects are amazing in this, and it is extremely wild that this is done by Peter Jackson, who would later go on to do Lord of the Rings. Like, that Lord of the Rings is so, like, a high-profile, big-budget movie, and then to compare it with just, like not even 10 years earlier, and the dude was making Brain Dead, it's like, hell yeah. Peter Jackson, he can do it all. But yeah, I loved this. And watching it with people on the Discord was so much fun. Next up is Neon Maniacs. Neon Maniacs is another one, not especially good. It's not an especially good movie, but it is a movie that has some wild scenes, and I think it becomes like the Brain Dead is 100% better than Neon Maniacs, but the only reason why I think I put Neon Maniacs a bit higher on this list is because I had never seen this, and this was like a movie that felt like it should have been on a live watch. Like, I feel like next year I will probably convince Kelsey to let me show Neon Maniacs to people because it was wild. There are so many random, like, this movie starts out with all these like kids who are like hanging out in San Francisco and just like going to this park and like drinking and having fun, and then the weirdest barrage of slasher villains just show up. There are like 8, I think, of the weirdest looking slasher characters that you've ever seen that are all very super distinct and should be in their own movies, but they're all crammed together. They do not match. Like, you're like, what is up with the Neon Maniacs? Because these monsters come out and they're all in these like amazing looking suits. It's all weird, and you know, it's pretty atmospheric as well because like there's a lot of good like lighting and stuff like that for this, and it was just trying to discover like why does this movie exist was just very fun. It is probably a movie that the effects definitely trump most of what's going on in it, but it did have enough like little character moments aside from people getting chopped and diced and sliced that I did think it was still fun. So yeah, Neon Maniacs, if you're an effects aficionado and you just want to see something that's absolutely wild, you should do that. Next up is Witch Trap. Another movie that is not good. Witch Trap, not good. Witch Trap is not a good movie, but it is outstanding to watch. Like, it is so fun and funny to watch. All the acting is like super stilted. It's basically, the plot is that is this like haunted mansion, and they like the owner of the mansion wants to get like people in to like do like studies on it, but people keep dying when they go to the mansion, so he hires like security guards to like hang out and like save them. And like one of the security guards is like played by this guy who has like the worst sardonic line deliveries of all time. It just like feels like every 5 minutes he's just like, whoa, somebody needs to get this guy a beer. He's talking wild. And you're just like, what is this character? Why is he here? And there's like this scene where like some like this psychic lady is like talking about her near-death experience, and she's just like, it was like nothing I've ever seen before. And it was like super stilted dialogue. And he's like, I know that we are not alone. I have seen the other things that are out there. And then it cuts to the security guard who's like, huh, sounds like what my old partner used to tell me right before he puked on my shoes. And you're like, what? Who put these two characters together and was like, hell yeah, I guess we're making this into a movie? Witch Trap. And it does have Linnea Quigley in it, and she's always a delight to see in 80s movies. Next up, a movie that is very, very good, and another one that's like first for me, is Vamp. I was like amazed by Vamp. I think that I have a tendency to love me my vampies. I love vampires. I've always loved vampires. I don't really know why. I think it's because I just think goths are pretty cool. And vampires are like the ultimate goths because they'll suck your blood. But yeah, I've always loved vampires. And honestly, I think for like the 1980s seems to have my favorite vampire films of all time. So, you know, you got Fright Night, you got The Lost Boys, and you've got Near Dark, which again is another one that's like just outstanding. And I think Vamp deserves to be up there with them. It's like a really interesting movie because it's kind of half comedy, but when the horror stuff happens, it feels real. You have like an amazing and strange lead performance from like the head vampire by Grace Jones, who is just captivating in this movie, and everything she's doing, you're just like, what is going on here? I'm really interested in this. The color palette of this movie is like really, really cool. And yeah, I just really had a love for Vamp. I thought it was really, really interesting and really good. And I will definitely be watching this one again in the future. And it does stand up there with those other 80s vampire films. And last but certainly not least, but probably the biggest surprise of the month, is Evil Dead Rise. I loved Evil Dead Rise, and I was kind of surprised. I was not expecting anything good from Evil Dead Rise. I don't really like the 2014 remake of Evil Dead. I need to watch it again. I like the setup, but I didn't like how the movie played out, really. But I need to rewatch that one, clearly, because it is now sitting as the only Evil Dead film that I don't love. So it's probably a me problem and not that movie's problem. So I need to rewatch that because I loved Evil Dead Rise. I was like, this movie is awesome. It gets wild. There's some wild gore in this movie. There's some great characters in this movie that has a lot of great character moments in this. The core family at the center of this is really kind of relatable and interesting, and you want them not to die, and then that is always kind of the standing towards good horror movies for me is if you want the characters to continue to live. And yeah, Evil Dead Rise is amazing. This entire family in this soon-to-be condemned apartment, and they find something mysterious under there, and it brings the Deadites out. And then the maniacal machinations of the Evil Dead commence. And yeah, it was wild. I had a great time with it. So yeah, those are the movies.